Bankrupt, I found out he had quietly settled his debt by marrying me off to the Grant family. People said Philip Grant, the only son of the Grants, had a volatile temper and would spend his whole life in a wheelchair, unable to stand. Hearing that sent a chill through me. Not because I was afraid, but because I realized I was being treated like a commodity to be traded. I once believed that no matter how poor life was, as long as there was love, I could hold the hand of the man I loved and walk with him to the end. But on the day I secretly took the household registration booklet, intending to marry my childhood sweetheart, I saw with my own eyes that Ethan was leading another girl into the civil affairs office. That girl was none other than Lily, the illegitimate daughter my father brought home after my mother passed away and later added to our family registry. In my previous life, I couldn't accept it. In front of the crowd, I grabbed Ethan's hand and demanded to know why he had betrayed me. He immediately shielded Lily, standing firmly in front of her to protect her. He said Lily's background wasn't clean, and if she married into the Grants, she would be despised. Philip Grant, the man in the wheelchair, was unpredictable and frightening. Ethan said he couldn't bear to let Lily fall into such a pit of fire. But me, I was different. I was strong, smart, and capable of overcoming anything on my own. This time, when Ethan and Lily went to register their marriage, I stood quietly below the hall. I watched as the official photographer chose them as the model newlyweds of the day, taking their photos and offering blessings. When Ethan's eyes met mine, his smile froze and a flicker of panic crossed his face. I, however, remained calm, showing no anger or making a scene. Lily nestled against him, curling her lips into a smug smile as she looked at me with triumph. I knew perfectly well she didn't love Ethan. This whole scheme was just to push me out, forcing me to take her place so the Cole family could send me to marry Philip Grant instead. 3 years earlier, my father had wagered with the Grants, borrowing $15 billion. After years of business failures, nearly the entire century-old foundation of the Cole family had been lost, and it still wasn't enough to repay the debt. Philip had once been in a racing accident, leaving him paralyzed from the chest down. His temper was wild and domineering. Even though the Grants were the wealthiest family in Yen City, no daughter from a respectable family dared to marry him. To settle the debt, my father agreed to Mrs. Grant's proposal to send one of his daughters into the marriage. The Cole family had only 2 daughters, me, Charlotte Cole, and Lily, the illegitimate child my father brought home after my mother died and later entered into our genealogy. I never wanted to compete with her. But in her eyes, I was always the enemy. Stealing Ethan from me became the deepest wound, and one of the rare times I had to swallow defeat. When Ethan betrayed me, I obediently returned home to wait to be married off. Somehow, though, the Grants discovered that I had once intended to elope with Ethan. They immediately broke off the engagement, and claiming they had been insulted, demanded the debt be doubled. My father was furious and blamed all the failures on me. In the end, I chose to end everything in tragedy. Lily, meanwhile, hid in Ethan's home, crying and telling her pitiful story until the Grants were overcome with guilt and voluntarily erased the Cole family's debt. Not only that, she received an enormous payout that helped Ethan's family business recover, and the Lewis Group quickly rose to become the newest tycoons of Yen City. Now that I had been given another life, I swore I would never again let myself be used as a stepping stone for someone else. Under Ethan's panicked gaze, I turned and walked away, heading straight into a luxury boutique to select a gift for my future mother-in-law. My sudden appearance left the Grants completely stunned. Mrs. Grant seemed to know from someone that I had once planned to ask Ethan to propose to me, so her attitude toward me was very cold. I was used to such chilly faces, so I calmly presented the 30-carat diamond bracelet I had custom ordered and respectfully offered it to her. I had also prepared a set of acupuncture equipment designed to aid in nerve recovery, intended for my future husband, Philip Grant, whom I had never met. At first, Mrs. Grant barely paid attention to the bracelet, but when her eyes fell on the acupuncture device, she slightly curled her lips, her sharp gaze narrowing as she studied me. "You know medicine?" she asked. Clearly before meeting me, she had already investigated the 2 Cole daughters. I didn't deny it, Instead, I explained that before my mother passed away, she had been paralyzed in an accident. All of her post-surgery recovery and daily care had fallen entirely on me. Mrs. Grant's expression darkened. "Your family didn't have the money to hire a nurse or a caretaker?" she asked. I swallowed hard, forcing down the hatred I felt for my father, and answered evenly. "We did hire help, but my mother was very proud. For the more delicate matters, she preferred me to do them. It made her feel a little more at ease." The truth was that my mother had been injured chasing after my father's mistress. When she awoke and realized she was paralyzed, she refused to eat, afraid of becoming a burden to me. I flew back overnight from England, dropped out of school, and stayed by her side day and night, desperate to keep her alive. To me, nothing the Cole family owned mattered more than my mother. But after 7 years of my devoted care, she still left me. She didn't want to be a burden, and even more, she didn't want me, still so young, to stand against my father, be cast out of the Cole family, and become a homeless orphan. That was why I had endured my father and Lily until now. Mrs. Grant said she wanted to visit my mother to see how she was. I shook my head and told her my mother had passed. "But," I added, "I do have a lot of experience caring for someone paralyzed. If you'd like, you could allow me to try taking care of him first." I didn't mention marriage at all. The Grant family already resented what I had done in the past. I had no need to push and risk being humiliated. But after the accident, Philip had completely changed. He refused to let anyone approach or care for him. I believed that more than having a daughter-in-law to carry on the family line, what Mrs. Grant truly wanted was for her son to rise again. In my previous life, after I was already dead, I had seen with my own eyes what weighed most heavily on Philip. I knew he wasn't paralyzed because of a biological injury. It was one incident that left him consumed by shame, causing him to give on himself. If I could help him untangle that knot in his heart, he could start over again. Mrs. Grant instructed a servant to lead me to meet Philip, telling me to persuade him myself before anything else happened. His bedroom was originally on the 3rd floor of the mansion, but to make care more convenient, the Grants had moved him into the large master bedroom on the 1st floor. Outside his room was a spacious sitting area, and since Mrs. Grant and I hadn't spoken softly, Philip had likely heard every word of my plan. I clenched my fists tightly, forcing myself to stay calm. The truth was, I had seen Philip before. The man once called the shining jewel of Yen City, twice before his accident. Born with a silver spoon in his mouth, he was the sole heir of the wealthiest family in Yen City. He stood 6'2" with a striking physique, his features carrying the stunning beauty of the Grant bloodline. Skilled in business, intelligent, and handsome, he was the dream figure of countless young women. After the accident, shielded by the Grant family, he withdrew from the public eye. Yet even then, there were still fangirls willing to pay enormous bribes just to. The servants in the Grant household had always hoped to capture close-up photos of him, and young women clung to old pictures, sighing over him with sorrowful admiration. But I had witnessed with my own eyes the moment when that shining jewel shattered, the day Philip Grant had his accident. The old physician who treated my mother was suddenly summoned urgently to the Grant estate. His assistant was not available, and because I had lived by his side for half a year, learning under his careful guidance, he thought I could accompany him to help. The young man, only 17 at the time, had once carried a gaze that was open, proud, and free. But after the accident, that brilliance had collapsed, leaving only fragility, like delicate ice flowers ready to break at a touch. His eyes were hollow, devoid of life, as if he had lost all will to continue. Mrs. Grant wept bitterly, begging the physician to save her son. It was one of the rare times she showed weakness in front of outsiders. I followed the physician and assisted him through Philip's first acupuncture session. But after we left, Philip went on a hunger strike in protest. He refused to let his mother hire more doctors, tormenting his already broken body. At that time, neither of us could have imagined we would one day be bound by an arranged marriage. And I never imagined that in my past life, out of guilt for my tragic death, Philip would be the one to ask his mother to forgive the Cole family's debt, and even give Lily a massive sum as compensation. That blood-stained money, whether I could claim it in this life or not, I swore I would never let Lily enjoy so easily. I pushed open the heavy carved wooden door, and a strong medicinal scent mixed with a faint cold fragrance rushed into my nose. Philip sat with his back to the door, in a wheelchair facing the garden outside the window. He wore a black silk shirt, the clean cut of his shoulders, and the sharp line of his nape resembling the edge of a blade. His voice, when he spoke, was low and cold. "Get out." I didn't retreat. Instead, I quietly closed the door behind me, placed the acupuncture kit on the table, and said steadily, "Mr. Grant, I'm here to discuss a deal." He immediately turned his chair around. The face that once drove the daughters of Yen City to madness was now deathly pale, almost translucent. A vicious scar ran from the corner of his brow down to his chin. But the most terrifying part was his eyes, dark and deep, like a bottomless, icy lake. "Charlotte Cole," he drawled, narrowing his eyes. "The eldest daughter of the Cole family. I didn't expect you to still be remembered." "It's me." I looked straight into his eyes. "I know you don't want this marriage. I don't want to be married off either. But I need the Grant family's protection, and you need me. What could I possibly need you for?" He sneered, his fingers idly stroking the armrest of his wheelchair. "You're nothing more than an ordinary woman, eyeing the Grant fortune." I walked up to him, crouched down so that I had to tilt my head up to meet his gaze. "You need me to help you stand again." Philip's face was expressionless, cold as ice, though the corner of his lips curved in a mocking smile. I ignored it, remaining calm as I continued. "7 years ago, I came with Dr. Chen to the Grant estate. You refused treatment then, but I saw your medical report. Your spinal nerves were not completely severed. In theory, there was still a chance for recovery." Philip raised his brows, his tone chilly. "What could you possibly know?" "I know why you can't stand," I said firmly. "Most of it is psychological. Dr. Chen once told me that your treatment was progressing well. It was you who resisted recovery. In my previous life, after my death, I accidentally discovered the root of his illness. His paralysis wasn't truly caused by the accident. It had been orchestrated by his father's new lover. Philip knew perfectly well that standing again would mean facing the person who crippled him, yet still roamed free, untouched by the law. It would also mean taking over Grant Corporation, a filthy, corrupt swamp he wanted no part of. And it also meant he would have to tell his mother the bitter truth about the marriage she had been deceived into arranging. He couldn't bear to do it, so he chose instead to paralyze himself. The room sank into a deathly silence. Philip's breathing grew heavier, his eyes swirling with emotions I couldn't begin to understand. After a long while, he suddenly laughed. "Miss Cole, you've got some nerve. Do you think you can threaten me with this?" "No." I shook my head. "I'm simply offering a deal. I'll help you recover, and you'll keep the engagement for me as temporary protection. When you're able to stand again, the engagement can be broken at any time." He stared at me for a long moment, then abruptly reached out and gripped my chin. "Temporary protection? If you really managed to make me stand, my mother would hand you the whole world. Charlotte Cole, what do you really want?" I answered calmly, "I just want you to get better, and give me some protection. Once I've taken back the Cole family, I'll leave on my own." "You're not afraid I'll burn the bridge after crossing it?" he asked with a cold smile. "I'm not afraid," I said evenly, meeting his gaze. Young Master Grant is a man of his word. By the time I left the Grant estate, night had already fallen. The moment I sat in the car, my phone began to buzz non-stop. On the screen, 2 words lit up: "Father." My lips curved into a cold smile as I pressed mute. In my previous life, at this very time, my father must have already heard the news of Ethan and Lily registering their marriage. He would have been furious, storming around to vent his anger on me. After all, losing me meant losing the tool for his marriage alliance, and he'd be forced to send Lily to marry Philip in my place to fill the debt. But this time, I was determined to turn the tables. I slowly drove back to the Cole family villa. The moment I stepped through the door, the sound of porcelain shattering rang out. My father, eyes bloodshot, rushed at me. "How dare you come back here? Ethan and Lily just registered their marriage. Do you even know what that means?" Lily stood behind him, eyes red as though she had been crying, but the corners of her lips carried a faint, smug smile. "Of course I know. I said lightly as I took off my coat and hung it on the rack. It means my little sister has found her true love. I couldn't be happier for her. My father froze, clearly not expecting that reaction. And what about the grants? What about our debt? Don't worry about that, I cut him off, pulling a folder from my bag. I met with Mrs. Grant today. She agreed to let me marry into the Grant family. This is the new loan contract. The Grants have given us another 3 years of grace. My father's hands trembled as he flipped through the pages. How? How is this possible? Lily's face instantly changed. Sister? Didn't the Grants, didn't they? I looked at her with a faint, cold smile. Weren't they displeased because of me and Ethan? You're awfully quick with your news. Even the internal matters of the Grant family reach your ears? Her face went white. My father, meanwhile, was so caught up in his joy that he didn't notice the undercurrents between Lily and me. This is wonderful. Charlotte, you've always been the most sensible one. I gave a quiet, mocking laugh. In my past life, he had said the very same thing, right before he pushed me into the fire that nearly cost me my life, after the Grants broke off the engagement. But there is one condition, I said calmly. The Grants require me to move in starting tomorrow, so I can get used to the living environment. My father hesitated, frowning. He worried that moving out would damage my reputation. Which matters more, I countered smoothly. My reputation, or the survival of Cole Corporation? Besides, Mrs. Grant personally invited etiquette instructors to teach me. Outsiders will only see that the Grants take this marriage very seriously. He was immediately convinced. All right, move in tomorrow. As I headed upstairs, Lily stepped in front of me to block my way. What exactly are you scheming? Lily hissed, blocking my way. I flicked her hand aside with a mocking smile. Aren't you good at guessing? Then go ahead, guess. On my very first day at the Grant estate, Mrs. Grant wasted no time asserting her authority. She handed me a thick notebook. From today onward, you must follow these rules to the letter, especially the ones regarding Philip's care. I flipped it open and skimmed through. It detailed everything, from his daily schedule to his meals, and even dictated the tone of voice and exact words I was supposed to use when speaking to him. Mrs. Grant, I said, closing the notebook, forgive me for being blunt, but these rules will only make him resist treatment more. Her gaze instantly sharpened. What are you implying? Young Master Grant doesn't need to be treated like fragile porcelain, I replied steadily, meeting her eyes. What he needs is to be seen as a normal man, a man with pride. Mrs. Grant's expression shifted several times before she finally said coldly, Fine, I'll give you 3 months. If there's no improvement by then, you know the consequences. I nodded in agreement, though in my heart I knew it wouldn't take 3 months. With his current reflexes, once Philip's psychological barrier was lifted, he could stand within a short time. That night, I carried a tray of tonic soup to his room and knocked. Leave it, came his voice, cold as ever, from inside. I pushed the door open anyway and saw him reading company documents. Without looking up, he said icily, Put it down and go. I didn't move. This soup has to be taken while it's hot. At that, he finally raised his eyes, dark and shadowed. Charlotte Cole, don't think just because I accepted this deal you can order me around. This isn't an order. I set the tray down and pulled a small box from my bag. It's part of your treatment. Inside was a set of finely crafted acupuncture needles. Philip's expression shifted slightly. You actually think those needles will help? It's not what I think, I answered calmly. It's what Dr. Chen proved. His technique is renowned and highly effective. I only mastered 70 or 80%, but it's enough to cure you. Philip's fingers trembled slightly. Get out. I ignored the dismissal and stepped closer, crouching down in front of him. He instinctively tilted his head up, and in that instant I quickly inserted a needle into the acupoint on his leg. His muscles tensed sharply, but to my surprise, he didn't push me away. Do you feel that? I asked. His throat moved and he gave a faint nod. Good. I continued placing a few more needles. Starting tonight, I'll come every evening to perform acupuncture. Within a month, I guarantee you'll be able to stand. He gave a cold laugh. And what makes you so confident? Because I know you can. I looked straight into his eyes. Philip, no one knows better than you that you've never truly been crippled. You've always longed to stand again, to protect the one you love. His pupils shrank violently. Suddenly, he gripped my wrist hard. "Who told you that?" I gently touched his knee. "When I inserted the needle just now, your reflex response was incredibly sharp." He stared at me, his eyes filled with complicated, unreadable emotions. After a long silence, he abruptly released me. His voice was hoarse. "Leave." I recognized it as his compromise. Gathering the needles, I stood and walked out. As I closed the door behind me, I heard him say, "Tomorrow night, 8 o'clock." Life in the Grant household turned out to be calmer than I expected. By day, I followed Mrs. Grant to learn how to manage family affairs. By night, I performed acupuncture and guided Philip's rehabilitation. Between Philip and me, a strange kind of tacit understanding gradually formed. He no longer spoke harshly to me, and I didn't intrude into his private affairs. Everything remained steady, until one afternoon, when the calm of the Grant estate was broken. "Miss Cole, there's a man named Lynn here to see you," the butler reported respectfully. I was sitting with Mrs. Grant, sipping tea in the tea room. At the mention of his name, I raised an eyebrow. "Ethan." Mrs. Grant set her cup down, displeasure flickering across her face. "Isn't he the childhood sweetheart who is now your brother-in-law?" I asked evenly. "Would you like to see him, Mother?" It was the first time I had called her that. Mrs. Grant was visibly taken aback, then nodded. "Very well, let him in." Ethan entered with a dark expression. Seeing Mrs. Grant there as well, he looked uneasy. "Mrs. Grant, my apologies for disturbing you." She took a sip of tea, her tone calm but sharp. "Mr. Lynn, what business brings you here?" His eyes flicked toward me. "I want to speak to Charlotte in private." "Whatever it is, you can say it here." I smiled lightly. "There's nothing to hide between me and Mother." His face grew darker. He drew in a deep breath. "Charlotte Lily has been hospitalized." I arched a brow. "Oh, what happened to her?" His fists clenched. "She's pregnant, but yesterday, she suffered severe bleeding. The doctor said it was because she had been using birth control pills for too long, which caused hormonal imbalance." I almost laughed aloud. In my previous life, Lily had played the very same trick, pretending to miscarry, blaming it all on me, and turning my father completely against me. I hadn't expected her to start acting this early in this lifetime. "So what?" I asked calmly. Ethan's eyes flashed with anger. "She said you tampered with her medication, Charlotte. I know you hate us, but the baby is innocent." The porcelain saucer clinked sharply as Mrs. Grant set down her cup. Her expression turned cold. "Mr. Lynn, you dare come to the Grant family home and slander my future daughter-in-law? Do you have any proof of this supposed crime?" Ethan's bravado instantly wilted. Lily said. "What she said doesn't matter," I cut him off. "What matters is evidence. Where is the medical report? The drug test results?" He froze, unable to answer. I sighed and pulled out my phone, dialing Lily and putting it on speaker. "Lily," I asked bluntly, "did you tell Ethan I spiked your medicine and harmed you?" There was silence on the other end for a few seconds. Then her weak voice came through. "No, I didn't." Ethan misunderstood. Ethan's face turned ashen. "Good," I said with a smile. "Then focus on resting. Philip and I will visit you soon." Outwardly, we were still two sisters who cared for each other, preserving the Cole family's dignity. I hung up and looked at Ethan, whose face was now gray with humiliation. "Anything else you'd like to say?" He stumbled back a few steps, then suddenly fell to his knees. "Charlotte, I was wrong. Lily has been lying to me all along. Our company is in financial trouble. We needed money, so I planned to deceive you." I laughed coldly. "Get out, don't embarrass yourself here." He left, dejected and humiliated. Mrs. Grant studied me with a thoughtful expression. "You already suspected something like this would happen." I shook my head. "No, but I know Lily. She loves playing the victim, yet she's terrified of being exposed." Mrs. Grant suddenly chuckled. "Charlotte Cole, now I see why Philip has accepted you." Just then, the heavy doors were pushed open, and Philip was wheeled in, his brows tightly furrowed. "That girl dared to slander you?" "It's been taken care of," I answered softly. He snorted proudly, then suddenly pushed himself up from the wheelchair. He managed only a few seconds before collapsing back down, but it was enough to make Mrs. Grant cry out in shock. "Philip. My son. I'm fine," Mrs. Grant said, her voice trembling. "But how could I allow my daughter-in-law to be bullied?" Philip's sudden change in attitude toward me startled not only me, but even Mrs. Grant seemed surprised. She must have guessed he wanted to speak with me alone, because she dabbed the corners of her eyes with a handkerchief and excused herself under the pretense of other matters. I bowed slightly. Thank you, Philip. Whatever the reason, what you just said will make my days here at the Grant estate much easier. But he frowned, shooting me a cold glance. Why are you so timid? Do you let everyone walk all over you, your sister, your brother-in-law, even your father? If you can't handle it, you can leave it to me. Consider it me repaying a debt. I laughed lightly. 3 people? What, do the Grants dabble in illegal business? He glared at me. I meant throwing them in prison, doing such vile things and still daring to hover around you. They're nothing but a nuisance, distracting me from my treatment. So that was what he meant. Perhaps he had already investigated the tangled mess of my family. I answered seriously. There's no need. I'll handle it myself. After coming back to life, nothing matters more to me than taking revenge with my own hands. I already had the evidence of my father and Lily embezzling company assets. I was only waiting for the right time to expose it. For now, I let them climb higher, just so their fall would be harder. And the Lynn family? They had already lost their funding. They could barely survive themselves, let alone shield the coals. Besides, the woman Philip hated most was about to return. I had no intention of interfering with his revenge. He didn't get angry at my refusal, only furrowed his brows. If you can't manage it, then call me. We're partners now, after all. I gave a soft reply. All right. In the days that followed, Philip became unusually cooperative with me. Each day during rehabilitation, he insisted on lengthening the sessions, even asking me to increase the difficulty. Watching him grit his teeth through the pain, sweat dripping down yet still persevering, moved me. My hands grew even steadier as I worked. By my calculations, by the end of the month, he was able to walk a few steps along the wall. Mrs. Grant was ecstatic. She showered me with jewelry and money transfers, and even phoned Mr. Grant, who was managing business in Europe, telling him to return and host a banquet to celebrate Philip. But when Philip heard that his father would be bringing their foster daughter, Julia, back with him, his face immediately darkened. He snatched the phone from his mother's hand and hung up without hesitation. Mother, I don't want them coming back now. I noticed the servants' reactions around us, wondering which of them might be Mr. Grant's informants. Yet Philip still openly revealed his stance. To help him out, I slipped my hand into his. He just wants to wait until he's fully recovered, so he can surprise Father and Julia. If they come back too soon, it'll ruin the fun. I wheeled Philip back toward his room, but as soon as we crossed the threshold, he shoved my hand away. Who told you to interfere? His voice dropped low, his eyes sharp and cold. Did you think that would earn you favor with the Grants? I pulled my hand back, my palm red from his grip, but my expression stayed calm. I only didn't want your efforts to be wasted. He gave a cold laugh and turned his wheelchair toward the large window. Julia's coming back. Do you even know who she is? I nodded. The girl your parents have sponsored for years, and also one of the people responsible for the accident that left you paralyzed. Philip spun his wheelchair around, his eyes freezing over. You investigated me? There was no need to investigate, I said evenly, meeting his gaze. The scandal between her and your father is common knowledge in our circles. It's only that your mother has been shielded by you so carefully. She hasn't seen it. The truth was, in my past life after my death, I had witnessed with my own eyes Philip standing again. To take back power and send Julia to prison, that was when I realized the girl he had always treated as a sister was in truth the one seducing his father. But I couldn't say that aloud, so I made up an excuse. The room fell into heavy silence. Philip's hands clenched the armrests of his wheelchair so tightly that his knuckles turned white. After a long moment, he suddenly laughed. Charlotte Cole, you chose this path yourself. Then let's face it together. I smiled. Gladly. Grant and Julia returned earlier than expected. Mrs. Grant, her eyes still red, brought me the news. Philip's strange behavior before had finally made even his slow-to-realize mother suspicious. She used her connections to investigate and discovered the truth, that her husband had been having an affair, secretly supporting a seemingly pure college girl. That girl was the very one who had caused her son's accident. But after so many years of being forced out of the company, even if Mrs. Grant wanted to protect Philip's future, she no longer had the strength to oppose her husband directly. "Charlotte, take Philip to the villa for a few days," she pleaded, clutching my hand, panic in her eyes. "Say it's for his recovery, that he needs a quiet environment." I looked at her troubled expression. "What about you, Mother?" She shook her head. "No matter what, you two should leave for now." I turned and saw Philip pushing his own wheelchair toward us, his face dark as a storm. His voice was as cold as ice. "Just because I've been confined for 7 years doesn't mean I've done nothing." His words left Mrs. Grant frozen. Her lips trembled as tears slid silently down her face. "Philip, my son." "Don't cry, Mother." He wheeled closer and took her hand firmly. "I'm no longer that boy who let himself be bullied without fighting back." He lifted his head and met my eyes, his gaze burning with determination. "Charlotte, take me to the study." Inside, Philip opened the safe and pulled out a thick file. "These are the proofs I've gathered over the past 7 years. His finger pointed at the documents. "The accident back then was Julia's doing. She sabotaged my car under my father's orders." Mrs. Grant sucked in a sharp breath. "Impossible. Why would your father do that?" "He's wanted to replace me as heir for a long time," Philip said with a cold laugh. "Julia isn't just his mistress. She bore him an illegitimate child." I stood beside them and watched the world inside Mrs. Grant collapse. She sank onto the sofa, her face pale as paper. "Mother!" Philip's voice softened. "I need your help now. Can you contact your brother?" Her brother was a prominent name in venture capital and the strongest ally the Grant family had. Wiping her tears, Mrs. Grant nodded vigorously. "I'll call him right away." The day Mr. Grant returned, the air inside the mansion was suffocating. Julia walked in with him, holding his arm, dressed in a pristine white dress, her appearance gentle and delicate. When her eyes swept over Philip in his wheelchair, a glimmer of smugness flashed within them. "Philip," Mr. Grant said with feigned concern, "I hear you're doing rehab. Don't push yourself too hard." Philip gave a faint smile. "I'm not forcing myself. I can already stand." Before everyone's stunned gaze, he pressed his hands against the armrests and slowly rose to his feet. Julia's expression changed instantly. "Impossible," the doctor said. I cut her off with a smile. "Said Philip would never stand again, right?" Mr. Grant's eyes sharpened. "Who are you?" "Charlotte Cole," I answered steadily, "his fiancée, and the one who helped him stand again." Philip took my hand in his, our fingers tightly entwined. Julia's eyes blazed with jealousy as she stared at our joined hands. That evening, at the dinner banquet, Mr. Grant suddenly announced, "Next month is Julia's birthday. At that time, I will formally appoint her to the board of Grant Corporation." Mrs. Grant's eyes reddened at his words. But Mrs. Grant had learned how to stay calm. She didn't say a word. "I object," Philip said evenly. Mr. Grant narrowed his eyes. "You have no right to object." "Is that so?" Philip pulled out his phone and played a recording. The voices of Mr. Grant and Julia filled the room as they plotted together, plans that had nearly cost Philip his life. Julia shot to her feet. "This is fake." At that moment the butler rushed in, panicked. "Master, there are many police cars outside." Philip's uncle had long despised Mr. Grant, but for his sister's sake, he had tolerated it and stayed out of the family's affairs. Now, knowing all the suffering his sister and nephew had endured was caused by Mr. Grant, he could no longer hold back. With his influence behind them, Mr. Grant and Julia were swiftly arrested for attempted murder. After their arrest, the Grant estate plunged into short-term chaos. Mrs. Grant forced herself to stay strong, managing household affairs, while Philip officially began to take over the Grant Corporation. I had originally planned to withdraw once everything was resolved. But Philip insisted on keeping me at the estate, claiming his rehabilitation wasn't complete. "Do you really still need me?" I asked one evening, watching him walk into the study with steady steps. He glanced back, a smirk tugging at his lips. "What's this? Miss Cole wants to run off after taking advantage?" I was left speechless, and could only continue playing the role of his fiancée. Then came the day disaster struck the Cole family. My father called unexpectedly, his voice more panicked than I had ever heard. "Charlotte, come home now. Something huge has happened with the company." It turned out the financial fraud of Cole Corporation had been exposed. The stock price plummeted, and worse, the bank abruptly withdrew funding, cutting off all cash flow. I let out a cold laugh. Father, isn't this what you've always feared? It's finally here. Charlotte, his voice shook, only you can save Cole Corporation now. The Grants are rich, if you just ask. I won't ask, I cut him off. The gaping holes in Cole Corporation were created by you and Lily. You two can bear them yourselves. There was silence on the other end for a few seconds before Lily's sharp voice replaced his. Charlotte Cole, don't get cocky. Do you think clinging to the Grants will keep you safe? Let me tell you, Ethan is already seeking out Philip to propose a partnership. And when that happens, what? I interrupted with a light laugh. He'll betray me one more time? I hung up and went straight to find Philip. He was in a meeting, but when he saw me, he signaled for everyone to pause. What's wrong? He asked, frowning. Ethan is planning to approach you for a partnership, I said bluntly. Don't agree. Philip didn't answer immediately, only murmured. The terms he offered are very tempting. In business, one has to consider profit. I understood. He had only just taken over the company and needed profitable projects to win over the shareholders. That was exactly why I had to warn him. I pulled out my phone and played a recording. This is him and Lily. They're targeting the Grants. It was the same conversation I had overheard in my past life, before I died. Lily bragging to Ethan as she outlined their scheme step by step, exploiting cooperation between Lynn Corporation and Grant Corporation to seize the Grants' assets. Philip's eyes turned dangerously sharp. Where did you get this? That doesn't matter. I put the phone away. What matters is that now you know their intentions. He studied me for a long moment, then suddenly sighed. Charlotte Cole. You didn't need to remind me. I never planned to cooperate with them. Their enemies are your enemies. And if they're your enemies, then they're mine too. Can't you trust me a little more? Philip asked quietly. I gave a slight nod, but when the day Ethan truly came, I still wasn't at ease. I hid in the adjoining room and listened. Ethan sounded overly eager. Mr. Grant, our new energy project has enormous potential. If Grant Corporation invests, the return will be at least 300%. Philip flipped through the proposal lazily. It does sound impressive, but why choose Grant Corporation as your partner? Ethan faltered for a moment. Naturally, because of Grant Corporation's strength. And also because of Charlotte. He lowered his voice. I know the two of you are only in a transactional relationship. Once this deal succeeds, I can help you cut ties with her. She's too headstrong, not gentle or lovable like a woman should be. Being stuck with her must be tiresome. Before he could continue, Philip's icy voice cut in. Mr. Lynn, it seems you've misunderstood. He rose from his chair, looking down at Ethan from above. First, Charlotte Cole is my fiancée, not some transaction. Second, your project is a scam. I already have the evidence. Ethan's face went pale. That's impossible. Philip pressed a button on his desk. Several police officers entered immediately. Mr. Lynn, you're under suspicion of commercial fraud. Please come with us. Ethan was taken away. I stepped out from the side room. Philip's eyes met mine. Satisfied? I nodded. Thank you. No need for thanks. He walked closer. But in exchange, can you finally tell me where that recording really came from? I drew a deep breath. If I told you I was reborn, would you believe me? To my shock, Philip nodded. I would. Why? I whispered. Because I once dreamed a dream, he said softly. In it, you died horribly, and I was consumed with regret for not realizing what you meant to me sooner. My body stiffened. In that dream, Lily brought me the news of your death. She cried and spun her story. When I investigated, I found the truth. But it was already too late. So when you appeared in my house, I knew you right away. In the dream, I kept chasing a figure, but I could never reach her. Charlotte Cole, will you give me a chance? Let me pursue you, walk beside you, spend the rest of my life with you? My eyes grew wet. So it wasn't just me who remembered the past. He had always been waiting for me too. Still, I didn't answer immediately. You can court me, I said softly, but marriage proposals will have to wait. He pulled me into his arms. This time, my heart truly wavered. On the day Cole Corporation declared bankruptcy, my father brought Lily to the Grant estate to beg me for help. In just a few days, he looked 10 years older, his hair entirely gray. Charlotte, he pleaded, I know I was wrong. For the sake of father and daughter, please save Cole Corporation. Lily wept bitterly. Sister, it's all my fault. I shouldn't have stolen Ethan. I shouldn't have harmed you. I looked at them, calm and detached. Father, do you remember how Mother died? His whole body trembled. She didn't die of illness, I said softly, meeting his eyes. She died because you pulled out her breathing tube. Lily gasped and turned to him, horrified. Father, is that true? My father collapsed to the ground, mumbling. How did you know? Because I saw the surveillance video, I answered, my voice shaking. By the time I arrived, she was already gone. To pay off his debts, my father had agreed to Mrs. Grant's proposal to send a Cole daughter to bear the burden. Charlotte Cole. My father suddenly laughed, his face twisted and grotesque. Do you think you've won? Let me tell you, the entire Cole Corporation debt has been transferred into your name. If I die, you'll die with me. Philip's voice cut in, cold and sharp. That so-called debt transfer contract is a fake. I've already had my lawyer take care of it. My father's face drained of all color. My father and Lily were arrested for attempted murder and financial fraud, and Cole Corporation was officially declared bankrupt. But the assets my mother had left behind had long since been moved under my control, so they remained untouched. When everything finally settled down, I told Philip I wanted to travel for a while, to relax. He leaned against the doorframe, blocking my way. Why don't you take me with you? You just started walking again, and you still have a company to manage. How could I possibly drag you along? I said, both exasperated and amused. He stepped closer, firmly shutting my suitcase. I don't care. Wherever you go, I'll go. What if you disappear on me again? Then he pulled me into his arms, his breath warm against my ear. Charlotte Cole, don't vanish on your own anymore. It terrifies me. The company, I've got my mother to handle things so nothing major will happen, but if you run away, I'll lose my wife for real. My face flushed crimson. Philip, are you serious? More serious than gold itself, he said, pulling out a velvet box. Dropping to one knee, he opened it. Marry me. Let's turn this trip into our honeymoon. Looking into the sincerity in his eyes, I couldn't help but laugh. All right, but on one condition. What condition? Our honeymoon has to be in Iceland, I said softly. In my last life, my greatest regret before dying was never seeing the Northern Lights. He stood and wrapped me tightly in his arms. Not just Iceland, I'll take you everywhere you want to go. In this life, I'll show you every beautiful sight the world has to offer.